I've been an embalmer for nearly 20 years, long enough to know that the dead have no secrets left in them. They don't resist, they don't argue, they don't move. My work is quiet, methodical, and private. Blood drained, cavity treated, features set, clothes pressed, the final version of a person returned to their family. That's the rhythm I've lived by. But there was one November evening that made me question whether the dead really do stay still, and it hasn't left me since. It was just after 6 when the call came from Dr. Linda Frey's office. She was the county medical examiner, brisk, no nonsense, the kind of woman who could deliver cause of death in the same tone as ordering coffee. "Elderly male, natural causes," she said, her voice flat through the receiver. "Transport's bringing him over." Nothing unusual. By 7, the gurney was rolled into my prep room, stainless steel table washed down and ready. The man was in his late 70s, thin, liver spots across his scalp. His name, I'd later learn, was Harold Laird. The embalming room always smells the same. Formaldehyde sharp in the nose, undertones of bleach, faint, sweet rot that never entirely leaves even with the best ventilation. I had my tools laid out, aneurysm hooks, suture needles, arterial tubes, forceps lined like cutlery at a dinner setting. My assistant that night, Trevor Knox, was in one of his moods, humming as he arranged the cotton rolls and towels. He was only 27, too new to understand when silence is better. "Looks like he's smiling already," he said, peering over the sheet. I ignored him. Setting the features is routine. You place an eye cap beneath each lid to prevent collapse, then stitch the mouth closed. Musculature sutured through the gums and nasal septum, neat and discreet so the lips rest naturally. I did exactly that. A clean stitch, tightened, checked. His expression settled into neutrality. I left the room for maybe 15 minutes, paperwork with Dr. Frey's report. When I came back, I froze. His lips were curled upward, teeth faintly showing, like he'd been told a cruel joke. I thought perhaps the jaw had loosened, the stitch slipped. I redid it, firmer this time, closing the line as tight as it would go. Neutral again. Trevor walked past me carrying gauze, glanced down, then laughed. "Creepy son of a bitch. Looks like he's grinning at you." He wasn't wrong. The lips had pulled again, tighter, wider. I inspected the thread. It hadn't broken. It hadn't even stretched. The skin itself seemed to have shifted around it. I muttered something about rigor mortis, though rigor doesn't work like that. Still, I undid the stitch, threaded the needle a 3rd time, locked it tighter than protocol ever required. My hands are steady, practiced. I know my work. I knew it was secure. When I leaned back to check, Harold Laird bit down, hard. The jaw clamped shut on the needle, still threaded through his gum. I yanked, startled, but it was stuck between his teeth, pinched like a trap. Trevor swore and dropped his tray. I stared at that mouth for what felt like an hour, but it couldn't have been more than seconds. Finally, the jaw loosened and the needle slid free, clattering onto the floor. The lips stayed curved in that grotesque smile. Trevor refused to help after that. He left the room muttering, said he'd fetch coffee, but he didn't come back until I was finished. I forced myself to continue. Arterial embalming through the carotid, cavity aspiration, trocar hiss loud in the quiet room. Every step precise, measured, clinical. I dressed him in the suit Cynthia Laird had brought, navy wool worn at the cuffs. He lay in the casket, grinning, no matter how I tried to set his features. I told Dr. Frey what happened. She waved it off. "Muscle contractions, Raymond. Bodies do odd things. Don't romanticize it." Her tone was final. But the next night, as I was locking up, the motion alarm tripped in the prep room. I went back, key ring jangling in my hand. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing like insects. On the table, Harold Laird's body sat upright. Not a slump, not a twitch, upright. His grin stretched so wide I swear the corners of his mouth had torn. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just backed out, closed the door, and told myself I'd imagined it. By morning, he was laid out in the casket again, smile intact, as if he'd never moved. At the viewing, Cynthia Laird was livid. She stood over the open casket, trembling. She demanded, "Why did you do this? Why would you bury him like that? He looks like he's mocking me." I tried to tell her it wasn't intentional, that it wasn't me, but my words felt hollow. That's the truth. That's what happened. I've handled thousands of bodies. They slump, they stiffen, they loosen. They don't bite down. They don't sit upright, and they don't smile against sutures strong enough to close a wound. But Harold Laird did. And I still wonder, when the soil pressed down and the casket sealed, did that grin remain? Or did it spread wider in the dark where no one could see?
Hello, YouTube family. Thanks for watching. Big love to our subscribers. You keep this channel alive. Only about 20% of viewers are subscribed, so if you enjoy the chills, hit that subscribe button. It's quick, it helps a ton, and it means more stories coming your way. See you in the next one, if you dare.
I'm writing this because I can't carry it any longer, and because I know if I try to tell anyone out loud, they'll shake their heads and remind me I've been working this job too long. Maybe they'd be right. 35 isn't old, but embalming makes you older in ways people don't see. You spend your life draining what's left of other people's time, and you start to wonder what's left of your own. Still, there are rules we keep, boundaries we never cross. Because if you let yourself believe the work is anything but mechanical, you won't last a year. I broke one of those rules the night the blood refused to drain. It was just before 10 p.m. when Sam Delaney brought the girl in. Car accident, single vehicle. Listed time of death nearly 4 hours before. Sam mentioned, almost in passing, that her skin was still warm when he moved her from the stretcher. He said it casually, like a complaint about the weather, but I saw the way his eyes avoided mine. Warmth lingers sometimes, especially with young bodies. I told myself that as I signed her in. The prep room was quiet except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights, one of them buzzing faintly like an insect trapped in glass. The stainless steel table was cold under my gloves as I positioned her, adjusting her head against the block. Allison Brooks, the new intern, hovered near the door. She wasn't supposed to be there that late, but she'd been shadowing me and begged to stay. I relented. That was mistake number 1. The girl's name doesn't matter. What I remember first was the weight of silence. No radio, no traffic outside. Just the sterile air and the faint smell of disinfectant masking the sweet rot that clings to every decedent, no matter how fresh. Her skin was pale, lips faintly parted, lashes wet from the moisture that sometimes leaks when lids are closed too quickly. I prepped her femoral artery, cleaned the site, tied off as I'd done hundreds of times. At 10:22, I made the incision. That was when everything shifted. Normally, the pressure eases with the first cut, a slow release, gravity taking its toll. But instead of draining, her blood pressed outward, pulsing against my scalpel in a rhythm too precise to be coincidence. Allison made a sound, half gasp, half whimper, and I snapped at her to stay quiet. I checked the line, my instruments, my own shaking hands. Nothing explained it. I adjusted the cannula, braced myself, and tried again. The resistance was firm, insistent, as if the vessels were still under pressure, as if her heart hadn't gotten the message it was done. I told myself it was vascular collapse, some rare anomaly. I told myself a lot of things. I worked for hours. Time lost its grip. My notes show it was nearly 1 a.m. when I finally stepped back, sweat soaking the collar of my gown. The basin was empty. Not a drop. Allison had long since moved to the corner, arms folded tight around herself. She whispered once, "She's watching me." I turned, and I swear to God, the girl's eyes were open, the sclera threaded red, tears leaking down in thin, crimson lines. The sight froze me, cut through every rational explanation I'd built in my head. That was when I broke rule number 2. Never leave work unfinished. I closed the incisions, sealed what I had opened, covered her gently, and told Allison to go home. The next morning when I returned, the log said the body had been embalmed fully. Every artery cleared, cavity work completed. The sutures were neat, the kind I've been told resemble my own, but tighter, cleaner, almost deliberate. On the prep table, the scalpel I had abandoned lay untouched, exactly where I left it. The disposal basin still held sterile water, cool and unused, and yet the girl's skin was firm, her features composed, exactly as though I had finished the procedure myself. When I asked around, no one admitted to stepping foot in that room. Sam swore he'd been off duty. Allison called in sick, said she couldn't stop dreaming of eyes that never closed. Father Daniel Rourke was called 2 days later when the staff refused to prep her for visitation. He blessed the body, murmuring prayers as though something in him already knew better than to ask questions. I tried to let it go. I've told myself stress does things, that memory shifts when you work alone under bad light too long. But the part I can explain, the part that gnaws at me, is the blood. The basin where I had expected to see it hours later, thick, dark, heavy, was still warm when I touched it, as though time hadn't moved at all. I don't know what was embalmed, or by whom, or what lies under those sutures. All I know is that when I close my eyes now, I see tears of red running down a face that should not have been able to cry. And I keep asking myself, if unfinished work carries its own curse, what happens when someone else decides to finish it for you?
To whoever ends up reading this, if anyone ever does, I don't know if this counts as a confession or just me trying to get the weight off my chest. My name is Gareth Sloan. I'm 48 years old. Been an embalmer for over 2 decades. I've seen things that would put most people off their dinner for weeks, and I've done them too. Sewing jaws shut, draining blood, replacing it with preservative, making the dead look presentable for the living. It's quiet work, lonely work. And until last winter, I thought the worst part of it was the silence. It was a Friday night, close to 11, in the prep room. I had a middle-aged man on the table, John Doe, paperwork incomplete, listed as natural causes. Fluorescents hummed overhead, one of them flickering, as they often do when the ballast is near its end. The tile floor was clean, but carried that faint trace of formaldehyde and disinfectant that never really leaves, no matter how many times you mop. The embalming pump was running steady, its motor vibrating against the counter, the arterial fluid moving through the lines with that low, gurgling hiss I'd grown used to, like someone breathing through a straw. Routine, I told myself. Cannulate the right carotid, insert the trocar later for cavity treatment, run the solution until the skin firms. I've done it thousands of times. But about 20 minutes in, when the machine settled into that familiar rhythm, push, pause, push again, I heard it. Not a noise outside, not the creak of the building. From the tubing itself, through the steady movement of fluid, I heard my name. Gareth. I stopped. My gloved hands hovered over the incision, my ears straining. I shook it off. Machines hum, pumps vibrate. I was tired. Long week, short sleep. I went back to work. But then it came again, softer this time, riding the hiss of fluid. Gareth, please. The voice was faint, but shaped enough that I couldn't dismiss it as imagination. I glanced toward the body, and for one awful second I thought I saw the chest rise as if he'd taken a breath. I leaned closer to the machine, thinking maybe an air bubble was passing through the line. But no, the words had cadence, intention. The pump surged suddenly, like someone had leaned on the switch, pressure spiking. I grabbed for the clamp, but before I could close it, the tubing bucked and arterial fluid sprayed across the floor in violent bursts. Not random splatter, pulses, lines, letters. I stood there frozen as crimson words streaked across the tile, forming shapes I could read, even though I didn't want to. Help! I'll never forget it. The corpse on the table exhaled, a soft rasp, air from the lungs that should have been long gone. And beneath the hiss of the pump,
The whispers deepened, pleading now, bargaining, promising. "Stop! Stop! You don't know! Please! Gareth!" I nearly bolted, but some part of me, maybe the part trained too long in procedure, forced me to keep working. My hands were shaking as I adjusted the line, mopped the mess with bleach, stitched the incision closed. With each stitch, the whispers grew fainter, the words dissolving back into wet static. The moment I sealed the last thread, the machine purred like nothing had ever gone wrong, smooth, obedient, steady. The man on the table lay quiet again, his face slack, no trace of what I heard. The next day, I told Monica Weaver, the funeral director. She laughed it off, said it was faulty tubing, maybe pressure buildup. She told me I was overworked and needed a night off. I didn't push it. What was I supposed to say? That the blood spelled words at my feet? But still, I wasn't the only one. Renee Calloway, the trainee, came to me a week later, pale as paper. She wouldn't go near the prep room anymore. She said while cleaning instruments, she heard murmurs in the background, like several voices talking just out of reach, none of them in the room. She thought I'd been messing with her, but when she realized I hadn't been in the building at the time, she quit. Just like that. Refused to even pick up her last paycheck in person. When I told Isaac, my old mentor, he didn't laugh. He just looked at me with that heavy stare of his and said, "The fluid remembers everyone it's passed through. Every vessel. Every voice. Sometimes it brings pieces with it." He wouldn't elaborate. Wouldn't come back to the prep room either. I tried to rationalize. I checked the pump, replaced the tubing, ran a test flush with water. Silent. No problems. I even recorded one session, thinking maybe the tape would catch the whispers. Nothing. Just the steady hum of the motor and the occasional click of the relay. But the whispers haven't stopped. They don't happen every night, only when I'm alone, late, the building heavy with stillness. Sometimes they're just sounds I can almost ignore, like syllables blurred by static. Other times they form sentences, half-finished, like someone trying to talk through water. Pleas, threats, bargaining. Always urgent, always desperate. What unsettles me most isn't the sound itself, it's the timing. The whispers begin not when I start the pump, but when the first flush of blood drains, when the chemical enters, when the exchange begins, as if whatever it is wakes up inside that passage of fluid. I'm writing this because I can't trust myself anymore. I don't know if I'm cracking under years of silence or if something real is bleeding through. Last night, while scrubbing down, I heard one final whisper as I shut off the lights. It wasn't my name this time. It was Monica's, clear as a bell. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't. But I do believe in voices carried by currents. And sometimes, when I stand alone in that tiled room, I swear the lines hum with words just below hearing, like a choir waiting for me to listen. If this ever reaches anyone, don't dismiss it as fatigue or bad tubing. I can still smell the iron tang of that spray on the floor, even after 3 bleach moppings. I can still see the word help pulsed out in dark streaks like handwriting from a vein. And I can't stop wondering, if the fluid remembers, how many voices are waiting in the reservoir, pressing against the plastic, desperate to be heard?